and he took an x-ray that changed my life. And, it was a Friday afternoon. I was expecting him to say it's stress. And he said,
Yeah.
there's an issue. I think you have lung cancer. He said, I'm not so sure. He saw the MRIs and, x-rays and so forth. And I said to him, what would you do if this was your wife? And he said, I'd tell her to wait 10 weeks. We'll come back and we'll take AB. We'll take more pictures and see if the spots change.
Welcome to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. I'm your host, LaMont Leavitt. In a world overflowing with noise, confusion, and distraction, we're here to cut through the clutter and explore bold, unique paths to a longer, healthier, and more vibrant life. Through candid conversations with business leaders, wellness experts, industry pioneers, and innovators, we'll uncover insights to help you discover your own personalized, unique approach to thriving. Tune in, trust the compass of wisdom within, and find your fountain of vitality. Hello, this is LaMont Leavitt. I'm the CEO of innoviHealth and the host of the podcast, Fountain of Vitality. Today, we have with us Michael Hanahan. He is the CRO of innoviHealth and has a fascinating story about how to push through some of life's challenges as he's battled cancer more than once and continued to survive and thrive and make a difference in the world. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. It's
My
great
pleasure.
to have you.
Thanks for having me.
When I met you, actually, we met on LinkedIn, and after dialogue, we crazy place to meet my future CRO, but he's been great for our company in so many ways. Love to hear your journey through life. From paper out days, and then when you were getting into your career, when you first had cancer, and how you battled that emotionally.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so still a diehard Steeler fan despite the current situation. But the sort of taste for entrepreneurship began early when I made literally 25 cents a day assisting the young man in our neighborhood who had our paper route. And at some point, he grew out of that and turned that over to me, and I turned one paper route into two, and then realized that I had a list of clients by virtue of delivering their papers 7 days a week, and so that turned into grass cutting in the summer and some snow shoveling in the winter, and provided me with $15 or $18 a week more than my peers had, and I could pursue some hobbies with that. So that's kind of how it all got started, and recognize the value of hard work early. My dad, who I has long since passed, I think very, very highly of. He over time had 7 heart attacks, and I spent a lot of time growing up in intensive care, by his side, and it really taught me a lot about, accepting what's been sent your way and making the best of it, because I never heard him complain a day in his life. And, he volunteered with things and was lower middle management of a steel mill. So we didn't have a lot of means, but
Sure.
He really just taught me the value of glasses half full, because it always was. He started out wanting to be a priest in high school, quite a bit older than I was when I was born, obviously, and then spent 4 years in World War II, and then spent a lot of time in the hospital while I was growing up. So most of my memories are visiting him and just watching him just look on the positive side despite what was going on in his life.
Yeah. What a great having a dad that taught you those things. That's fantastic. Talk about maybe in college, and then what led you to some of your first 1 or 2 jobs when you first found out you had cancer for the first time, how you what you did and how you handled that.
Sure. I'll try to give you the abbreviated version, but went to college in Florida for a couple of years, and then Dad had a heart attack number 3 or 4, and I was constantly flying back because there were incidents in between that as well, and had a scholarship to a Washington and Jefferson, which is a pretty good school in southwestern Pennsylvania, and decided to transfer there. And I had a golf team. I was a collegiate golfer and so forth, and that way I could be closer to home and help out because I don't have brothers and sisters my age, and my only brother had moved to California years ago. So I was home and on the golf team and close enough to help out with some things. And I was always a music lover, and particularly a hobbyist with finer stereo systems. And still to this day, the better ones are tubes versus transistors and so forth. And was a music lover and a guitar player. And so I played in some high school bands and college bands. And from Pittsburgh, after graduation, I moved to Atlanta, where the job market was just thriving. And I happened to know somebody from Pittsburgh who was a trumpet player, but he also owned some stereo shops in Atlanta. And so I had a job there when I moved there. And oddly enough, serendipity, a woman walked in one day after I was there 6 or 8 weeks and making pretty good money. And the issue was she wanted a nice stereo, but had no idea how to even plug it in. So I offered to do that for her. And she said, I'll give you a little bit of money for doing that. And I went over her house over the weekend and I took my resume because she was director of marketing research at an advertising agency. And while I hooked her stereo up, I pitched myself and I got my first job on the advertising agency side in marketing research. And that launched a very long career in advertising, sales, marketing, business development, and so forth. She hired me. It was great. I thought that would be a cool thing to do, make advertisements. So
Great. Well, tell me. So at this point, you're about how old? Was it that when you found out you had cancer for the first time? And how did you find out that you got cancer?
well, I was 22, 23 then, and there's a lot of departments within an advertising agency, especially the larger ones. So I started out in marketing research, which is kind of like a detective role, figuring out what consumers think so you can design the advertising to message them. And, you want advertising to be relevant and unexpected. And you want it to motivate your audience to do certain things or act a certain way or make a phone call or come into a store, whatever.
Sure.
Back then, there was no online purchase. So I migrated over the next 10 years from the left brain side to the right brain side, where I became a creative director, writer, producer, and also worked in business development, because in advertising agencies, you have to pitch your clients, and prospects. So you don't just show up for someday and Coca-Cola wants you to do their advertising. You got to work for it, and you've got to demonstrate.
Yeah.
So about 10 years later, and in maybe 2 or 3 advertising jobs into my career, I was on the creative side and the business development side. My father passed away, and I was in very good physical shape, never smoked, was taking American karate, which is essentially Taekwondo from the waist down, and American boxing from the waist up. But the point there is I was fighting full contact twice a week, 7 rounds each day, and then taking. So, I was in great shape.
Yeah.
Probably 32, 33. And I was having trouble not coughing at the end of sentences. So I would talk to you and I would say something and then I would cough. And in Atlanta, you need allergy shots. So I went to my allergist, who's also a, asthma doctor. And I told him about the situation, and he said, well, it's probably stress. you're working 60, 65, 70 hours a week. You're young, your father just passed away. But that issue didn't go away. So I remember I was actually in Atlanta commuting to San Francisco weekly. And one day I came back and I said, that's it. I'm going to get checked out. And we happened to be doing advertising also for a hospital system in the South and in Georgia. And Columbia Health System of Georgia was the name. And we were doing Blue Cross of Georgia and so forth, among a lot of other national brands. And so I was able to get in to see a doctor same day. And he took an x-ray that changed my life. And, it was a Friday afternoon. I was expecting him to say it's stress. And he said, there's an issue. I think you have lung cancer. So.
And you're like, what?
I was like, what? Yeah. And so it was for Friday afternoon. And I happened to be dating someone who worked for a hospital. And so I discussed it with her. And I didn't want to tell my family because they just lost my father. And
right.
I didn't want to add additional stress to them while they were grieving. I just wanted to carry it myself and talk to one or two people. And so she happened to be able to get some doctors to come in that weekend, that next day, Saturday. So I had this one hospital say with an x-ray, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And, the next day, I had a bunch of doctors come in and do an MRI or CAT scan. I can't remember which one it was, but and anyway, whatever one does soft tissue, right? And that hospital confirmed that
the Friday findings.
Spots on both were an issue that had to be dealt with soon. So it was really, I was more concerned about my family than I was young, and non-smoker and great physical shape. It made no sense. But I had a first opinion and a second opinion. And so I went into the office on Monday and told my boss, who was the president of the company then, and he said, can't quit. You got to get one more opinion. So Emory Hospital happens to be one of the founding medical providers in the country, and he knew somebody there. And I remember it was one of very few people in the world. This guy was, I don't remember his name, but he was authorized to do both heart and lung transplants. So, man, he was out there in terms of qualifications.
Yeah.
And, to wrap this up and make it a long story short, he said, I'm not so sure. He saw the MRIs and, x-rays and so forth. And I said to him, what would you do if this was your wife? And he said, I'd tell her to wait 10 weeks. We'll come back and we'll take AB. We'll take more pictures and see if the spots change. And in the meantime, I got into juicing, centrifugal vegetable and fruit juicing every day. I was going to church weekly, and I thought maybe going to church daily would be a step up. So yeah. And long story short, my back actually it was 11 weeks later, and they ran all the tests again. Actually, they ran more thorough tests, and the spots were gone. So there are those that believe that the health and the prayer contributed to those spots going away completely, and maybe the juicing. And there are those that, believe it was a miracle. And I can't explain it. All I can tell you is the spots were gone, and I didn't have to put my family through that.
All that.
Just, it was great. So one way or another, it was a miracle to me.
Wow. Well, I'm curious on that. So, you look at prayer, church, miracle, but tell me on the juicing side. I know some people just have a juicer. Tell me how the vitamins can really be brought out in what you're doing on taking this juice, which you still do to this day, and what you put in it.
Correct. Well, there was a guy, they called him the juice man, and he was 80 and had more vigor and energy. And, that was obvious in his television spots and infomercials, and when you read about him. And so I sort of tracked his book down, and in his book it has recipes for this ingredient being, a vegetable or fruit, or something like wheatgrass, which has an enormous amount of vitamins and minerals if you juice it correctly. And so there's something called a centrifugal juicer. And it spins at a very high speed, and it's got a screen, and you push your vegetables and fruit. And I use apple, carrot, garlic, wheatgrass, and sometimes ginger. And what it does is it extracts all the pulp so that your digestive system doesn't have to work to break that down. And what's left is the juice, which is, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's incredibly more effective with releasing vitamins and minerals into your body immediately than having to digest something that you chew in your mouth and eat.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while. I still do that to this day with different formulas. They have formulas for hair and, your immune system and your heart and so forth. And you develop preferences, I would say, over time. Some are nasty, 2 shots, 2 ounces of wheatgrass is the equivalent of like a bushel in vitamin and mineral wise of eating vegetables and fruit. And it tastes like something out of your lawn. And, it is essentially, but, it's healthy and it's easy to just, do that. That was the first cancer episode when I was 32-ish.
But when you do that juice, about how much do you take it in the morning? Like 16 ounces or what?
Well, it's more an after work thing for me.
Okay.
Wheatgrass is kind of hard to deal with at home. So I do that with companies like Booster Juice, where you go and they can just make it there, and they have a lot of it. I have a juicer in home. We make about 15 ounces, 16 ounces, a half carrot, half apple, and then a small handful, in my case, of parsley. And I'll put garlic in there.
That's good.
It's pretty potent, so some people can't tolerate that as well as others. But, sometimes you mix it up with blueberries or, other things that you have in your fridge.
Oh, good. Well, so from that moment, let's see, Michael, you went on. Now, when you had cancer the second time, was that before or after your 9/11 story of just surviving life and that journey that you went through when you lived out there?
9/11, the 9/11 issues came before that.
Yeah. So that's an interesting story. I mean, we have these journeys in life where, what keeps us going, and you had cancer, potentially take you out, and for some reason it didn't for you. And I'd love to share your 9/11 story and how you were working at the time and how you ended up not being in one of those towers that day.
Oh, sure. Well, the advertising world was fascinating because you work for one company, but you get to work on a lot of other people's advertising and marketing. I've worked on everything from Coca-Cola to RJ Nabisco to, Applebee's, and the list is extensive. So I began getting exposed to pre-Y2K to a lot of technology companies. So by nature, you sort of have to learn their business in order to be able to advertise and market it. And that led me to a very good friend and mentor who was Oliver Cooper, who was CFO or COO of Manhattan Associates. It was a logistical software company about getting things from point A to point B, right? Somebody like Amazon would appreciate it and had used their services. And it was a really interesting time because I saw what people on the client side, not advertising, but the client side, how well they would do, and they become owners and have equity stakes in their companies and so forth. And some of the companies went public, some of them sold to other private investors, but they were doing very well financially, and Oliver did very well. So he recruited me into a company called NeoVest, which still has that name today. And I did all of their initial marketing. It was a startup, and essentially it was a financial tech company with marketing and sales and a institutional trading desk in Atlanta. All of the software was developed here in Utah, in Orem and Provo, and still is today. And sales were in New York, and more specifically, they were in the 84th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. So as president of the company, I was co-president, and my part was sales, marketing, and business development and fundraising. So I would be in New York 2-3 times a month, and I had an office on the 84th floor. And just we got lucky. What can I say? We were subleasing from a company called Wolfex, who was also a startup, but further down the line than we were. And they had raised a couple of seed rounds, an A and B round, and they were an electronic trading firm that wanted to move stocks back and forth over computers on the NASDAQ, I think. And we were subleasing from Wolfex. And they gave us, I think, 11 offices up there on their floor, and they could not raise their C round, so they couldn't pay their bills. So the World Trade Center threw them out. 3 weeks before 9/11, and out with Wolfex went NeoVest. So we got thrown out.
So you got thrown out of the World Trade Center 3 weeks before the towers went down.
Yeah. So we moved to 80 Broad Street, and I just because of the move, I didn't go up there that week, right? So was really lucky. I knew people that worked for me and worked with me that were coming across, on the ferry boats, and the jets went over their heads, and they watched them go into the buildings. So.
Wow. Well, what and then there's another. Sometimes we have these journeys of life, and being in the right place at the right time, or things just change, and you can't put your finger on it, but I guess you're supposed to still be here, Michael.
I know. It was. I can remember because my office actually looked down on the Statue of Liberty, and I'd watch helicopters, fly down 30 floors. It was really quite an amazing thing. That the other thing I remember, I was back in Atlanta and lived in the city limits, and we weren't quite on the flight path to the airport, but there were frequent approaches and takeoffs of airplanes. And I remember on 9/12, because we were told not to come into work, just looking up, and it was so quiet, there were no airplanes. And then I went to the grocery store, and people were so nice. Everybody was being kind to each other, and way more so than it was almost
night and day.
Night and day. And I had a friend who was an anchor on CNN, and I said to her, I said, if anything positive comes out of this, we're all just kind of being nicer to each other. People are saying hello. You get to the stop sign at the same time, they're letting you go first. And I said, I haven't seen that in a while. And she said it wouldn't last. And she was right, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's one thing about tragedies. It does bring out, and so oftentimes, the best in people, and makes them remember why they get up in the morning and they care about others. Well, tell me, so the second time you had cancer, that was after that, obviously. How did you discover that, and how did you wade through it?
In advertising, there are small agencies, large agencies, and everything in between. And one of the agencies where I was part owner, we were too small to get the American Cancer Society, because I remember at the time, I think they spent $25 million in media, and agencies make their money off of commissions. And somebody spends $25 million, then everything's 15% goes to the company, plus 15 or 17.65% of any production, like if you make commercials and so forth, right? So, because of my cancer experience, I felt very passionate about that. And so this was several years later. And I was creative director of business development and part owner of this company. And American Cancer Society, who's headquartered in Atlanta, came up for what's called review, which means they were questioning the effectiveness of their current agency and inviting maybe 8-10 agencies to pitch for their business and show you their thinking. And because of my experience, I got my creative team together and we went in with 7 or 8 campaigns. And I think I actually cried during the presentation because I felt so passionate about, wanting it to be successful. And the idea was to help them raise money, right? So,
Yeah.
If they had $25 million to spend on advertising, it better raise more than that. Otherwise, their money's better off in the bank earning interest and safer. So, we put together some good work and it was presented with passion and we got the business. So that was a way. It was all North America. So we were doing Canadian and English and French, and then we were doing the US, and we were doing Mexico and Spanish. And it was pretty effective. And then fast forward, I ended up in Utah, right, as a partner in a software firm. And somehow they tracked me down. I don't know how, but the Utah American Cancer Society board is one of the more influential boards in the country, because people in Utah have great family records that go back a long time, hundreds of years, and they're able, in some cases, to trace for research purposes, whether cancer is hereditary or, et cetera. And so they invited me to be on the board here of the Utah American Cancer Society. And we did a lot of good. And then for 3 years, I became chairman and chairman of the board. And I remember, and this is just one of those odd things in life. I remember when Angela Dumke who was previous chair before me, asked me to take over, and I accepted. And when I said that, I said, I'm going to get cancer again. And I'm going to do everything I can while I'm there to fight it, because the board here raises money, sends it to Atlanta, and they distribute it. But a lot of the money that's raised here goes towards rare cancers and things that maybe don't get funded or as popular, but still people suffer from.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I got melanoma on my left thigh, and it was a red spot the size of a pinhead. And my doctor, I get, physicals every year, and I were watching it, and I said, I'm tired of watching it. We gotta just biopsy this. And so that was Monday, and Tuesday night I was packing up to sell our company, and we were flying to New York to do it. I got a call at 9:00 at night from my doctor. He said, you need to find a surgeon.
Oh, man.
So, I was able to quickly because of being on the board. And so flew to New York. We did our presentation. The company got sold. I came back and I had surgery. That was a second time. And I think I mentioned earlier that I had gone to college in Florida for a couple of years before I moved back to Pennsylvania. And it was back before they knew the sun was not a good thing. We'd spend 10, 12 hours on the beach some days. But skin cancer takes sometimes 20, 30, 40 years to show up, after the damage is done. And so I also got something, it's serious, but not quite as serious as melanoma, but squamous. I had 25 stitches on the left side of my face. But, everything's great. Came through that all right. They didn't even knock me out for that one. So,
Well, any advice you'd give to someone who's struggling with different kinds of cancer? You've mentioned 3 different kinds that you've dealt with through your life, and the difference you've made in the lives of others by helping others. Any advice you'd give to someone who's struggling as far as keeping their positive mentality up and stay positive through the experiences?
well, I'd start with, you hear it, it's a drum beat, and maybe getting tired of hearing it. But if you don't act on it, then it doesn't do you any good. But early prevention is everything. And there are certain cancers that you just shouldn't die from. If you are fortunate enough to have access to medical care and health screening and physicals or whatever, but skin cancer can be seen, right? It shows up and can be dealt with. Colon cancer is a very slow moving cancer, and it's got sort of the ick factor about the whole exam process. But they can examine you and cut any polyps out while they're examining you. And so if they find it early, then they can prevent you from dying from it. And it's, like I said, it's a very slow cancer compared to some of the others. And it can take years and years, but don't put it off. Just decide you're going to do it and get examined. There's lots of things they can do now with AI. I've read recently where they can find pancreatic cancer 2 or 3 years sooner than before, and that's one that's
huge,
deadly. It's enormous. So and so for those who have family histories but just make it regular part of your checkups and screenings, especially when you hit those age groups where things like colon cancer or if you're in a high risk group.
Yeah, I found I really think people nowadays need to assume that the system isn't there to look out for them. We all need to be taking charge of our own health and be aware of it's time for a checkup. It's time if something doesn't feel right inside you, the minute that doesn't feel right, go check it out. You don't know what it is. Maybe something minor. It could be anything, but listen to your body. Your body will.
Oh, that's the best advice, right? And if I would like to also offer some advice to people who may know somebody with cancer. And the best thing you can do is listen. I had, I'll tell you, I won't throw his name under the bus, but I had a good friend and coworker, and it's a Monday or Tuesday night, I find out that I've got melanoma, which is pretty serious skin cancer. And I fly to New York and we do the presentation to sell the company, and then we're at lunch. And I said to my friend, I said, I'm sorry, I was off today. I didn't present very well. I got some bad news last night. So what's up? And I said, well, on my left thigh, I've got this spot, and it's melanoma, and it's at the stage where they've got to cut it out. The first thing he says, oh man, when I was growing up, my neighbor had that, and they had to take his leg off.
Oh man.
That's the last thing you want to hear. So if you know somebody with cancer, you got to stay positive, because they can do so many things now that they couldn't 5, 10, 15 years ago. But the best thing you can do is just hear them out. Listen, and listen more if it takes that. They need somebody to talk to.
Yeah. They don't need you to tell them, why are you doing it that way? You should try this therapy over here. Just listen and give them positive encouragement to whatever they're trying. Because we're all trying to stay alive and live as long as we can. So,
yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for being the CRO of innoviHealth. You've made such a difference in our products and our message as we at innoviHealth try to build better tools for the medical space out there. Anyway, thanks again, and we'll talk again soon.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You betcha.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. Head to fountainofvitality.com for more episodes, insights, and resources. Remember, your health is yours to own. Take charge, focus on what you can control, and keep exploring what works for you. Always be your best self, lift others, and trust the compass of wisdom. Until next time, stay vibrant and take care.